The second I heard the key turn in the lock, my stomach dropped like a stone into dark water. I stood frozen in my best friend's apartment, watching through the window as her car disappeared down the street. Rebecca and Marcus were gone, off to their dream anniversary trip to Bali. 10 whole days of tropical paradise, while I stayed behind to look after their son. I turned around slowly, plastering on my brightest smile, ready to ask little Ethan what game he wanted to play first. Maybe we could make that volcano science project he'd been talking about, or build a massive blanket fort, or watch his favorite superhero movies like we always did during our special aunt and nephew time. But Ethan wasn't reaching for his Nintendo Switch. He wasn't pulling up YouTube on the tablet to show me another gaming video. He was just standing there, in the middle of the living room, staring at me with an expression that made my blood run cold. His eyes, those sweet 7-year-old eyes that usually sparkled with mischief and laughter, looked ancient somehow. Tired, terrified. And then my nephew, the child I had watched grow up, the little boy who doctors said would never speak a single word due to a rare neurological condition, opened his mouth and said 5 words that shattered my entire reality. "Aunt Morgan, don't eat the cookies she made. She put something bad in them." His voice was perfect, clear, like he'd been talking his whole life, just waiting for this exact moment to break his silence. I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning around me like I was trapped on a nightmare carousel. The pink bakery box sitting on the kitchen counter, the one Rebecca had pressed into my hands just 20 minutes ago with that too bright smile, suddenly looked like a weapon. My sister in everything but blood. The woman who'd held my hand through my divorce, who'd helped me move 3 times, who knew every secret I'd ever whispered in the dark. She had just tried to poison me. Let me rewind this nightmare about 8 hours, because you need to understand how I ended up here, standing in this beautifully decorated apartment, discovering that everything I believed about the people I loved most was nothing but smoke and mirrors hiding something monstrous. My name is Morgan Castellano. I'm 34 years old, working as a senior financial analyst at a consulting firm here in Seattle, Washington. Not exactly the most exciting career path, I know. While other women my age post pictures of their adventures in exotic locations, I post spreadsheets. Lots and lots of spreadsheets. My therapist, Dr. Patricia Chen, says I hide behind numbers because they're predictable when people aren't. Chen is annoyingly perceptive. That Sunday morning started like any other weekend. I was in my small downtown apartment, nursing my 3rd cup of coffee, enjoying the rare Seattle sunshine streaming through my windows, when my phone lit up with Rebecca's name. We'd been friends for 12 years, ever since we met during orientation week at the University of Washington. She was the wild, creative artist who painted murals and dreamed in colors I couldn't even name. I was the practical, organized planner who color-coded my class notes and actually read the syllabus. Somehow, impossibly, we just clicked. "Morgan, I need the biggest favor." Rebecca's voice came through the phone, that particular tone she used when she wanted something. I should have recognized it as a warning sign, but hindsight is brutally clear. "Marcus surprised me with an anniversary trip to Bali. Can you believe it? 10 days, Morgan. 10 whole days in paradise. But we need someone to watch Ethan, and you're the only person I trust completely with him." Of course I said yes. I always said yes to Rebecca. She was my person, my chosen family after my own family had imploded so spectacularly. My parents died in a car accident when I was 23, just after graduation. No siblings, no extended family that gave a damn. Rebecca had been there through all of it, holding me when I cried, helping me sort through estate paperwork, making sure I ate and slept and kept breathing when all I wanted to do was disappear. And Ethan, God, I loved that kid like he was my own. Even though communication happened through gestures and that expensive tablet with the picture-based communication app, we had our own language. He'd show me his drawings, elaborate stories told through stick figures and wild splashes of color. I'd read to him for hours, watching his face light up at the plot twists. When he laughed, which was often, despite what the doctor said about his condition, it was the most genuine sound in the world, Rebecca had always told everyone that Ethan was born with this neurological disorder, something rare that affected his ability to produce speech. She'd taken him to countless specialists, tried every therapy, documented everything. The devoted mother who never gave up hope, even when the doctor said there was nothing more they could do. Everyone in our social circle praised her patience, her dedication, her unconditional love for her special needs child. I'd met Rebecca when Ethan was already 2 years old and completely silent. I was finishing my master's degree in Portland at the time, only visiting Seattle occasionally. By the time I moved back to Seattle permanently 4 years ago, after my devastating divorce from a man who decided his 22-year-old secretary was a better life choice, Ethan's silence was just a fact of life. Rebecca had the whole narrative polished and ready. I never questioned it. Why would I? She was my best friend. Mothers know their children. The medical reports she showed me looked legitimate, full of complicated terms I didn't understand. I drove over to their apartment in Capitol Hill around 11 that Sunday morning. It was one of those trendy converted lofts with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of place that screamed, "We're successful young creatives." Rebecca answered the door wearing a flowing sundress, her dark curly hair perfect, expensive luggage already lined up in the hallway, like soldiers waiting for deployment. She hugged me. Rebecca was always affectionate, always touchy-feely in a way that made my more reserved personality uncomfortable sometimes. But this hug felt different somehow. Tighter. More desperate. Like she was holding on to something that was slipping away. "You're saving my life, Morgan. Seriously. I don't know what I'd do without you." Her smile was dazzling. The kind of smile that belonged in toothpaste commercials. "I made you something special. You've been working so hard lately, and I know you skip meals when you're stressed." She practically dragged me into the kitchen and pulled out a pink bakery box from the refrigerator, the expensive kind from that boutique place on Pike Street. Inside were a dozen gorgeous cookies, chocolate chip with sea salt, my absolute favorite. "I made them myself this morning," Rebecca said, pushing the box into my hands with an insistence that felt aggressive. "Promise me you'll eat them, okay? You look exhausted, Morgan. You need to take better care of yourself. These have special ingredients that'll help you relax and sleep better. You've been dealing with so much stress." Something flickered in my gut, some ancient prey instinct that whispered danger. But I smiled and thanked her, because that's what I always did with Rebecca. I accepted her gifts, her advice, her criticism disguised as concern, and I never ever pushed back. She'd been there when I had no one. I owed her everything. Marcus appeared from the bedroom, hauling more luggage. He barely acknowledged me, just a quick wave and a mumbled hello. Marcus had always been quiet, almost painfully shy, the kind of man who seemed to shrink in his wife's presence. He was a graphic designer who worked from home, and in all the years I'd known them, I'd maybe had 5 real conversations with him. He seemed nervous today, though, sweating despite the cool apartment, his hands shaking slightly as he loaded bags. Rebecca gave me the full tour of the apartment, like I'd never been there before, which was strange considering I'd been there dozens of times. She showed me where everything was, talked me through Ethan's routine, explained how to use the communication tablet, even though I'd used it 100 times already. The whole performance felt rehearsed, like she was following a script. Then she opened the refrigerator one more time and tapped the pink bakery box. "Remember, Morgan, eat these, doctor's orders." She laughed, but her eyes weren't laughing. They were watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The car service she'd ordered, not a regular taxi, but some luxury black car, pulled up outside. Rebecca hugged me again, harder this time, and whispered in my ear, "Thank you for being my best friend, for always being there, for trusting me." The way she said trusting me should have been my second warning. But I was too busy being the good friend, the reliable Morgan and never let anyone down, to listen to my instincts. They left. The door closed. I turned around to find Ethan, and that's when my entire world exploded into a million pieces that I'm still not sure how to put back together. "Aunt Morgan, don't eat the cookies she made. She put something bad in them." I dropped the bakery box. It hit the hardwood floor with a soft thud, cookies spilling out like evidence at a crime scene. My hands were shaking so violently, I had to press them against my chest to make them stop. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice cracking into pieces, "you can talk. You can actually talk." He nodded slowly, those two old eyes watching me carefully. "I always could, Aunt Morgan. Mama made me stop. She said if I ever talked again, something terrible would happen to you. She said my voice was dangerous, that every word I said would hurt you bad. I love you, so I stopped talking. I was 3. The floor disappeared beneath me. I sank down right there in the middle of the living room, my legs just giving up completely. Ethan came and sat next to me, this tiny 7-year-old child who'd carried a secret heavy enough to crush most adults. "What do you mean she made you stop?" The question came out barely louder than breathing. And then Ethan told me a story that ripped apart everything I thought I knew about my best friend, about trust, about the family I'd chosen when my own was taken from me. Ethan wasn't born mute. There was no neurological condition. That was a lie Rebecca had crafted so carefully that even doctors believed it because she'd manipulated the testing, coached his responses, created a false medical history that no one thought to question too deeply. Until he was 3 years old, Ethan talked like any normal toddler. He learned new words every day, sang songs from his favorite cartoons, asked why about everything, told his parents he loved them at bedtime. Then one afternoon, everything changed in a way that would steal his voice for 4 years. Ethan had been playing upstairs in his room with his toy trucks, the kind that made siren noises that drove adults crazy but delighted kids. He got thirsty, so he crept downstairs to get a sippy cup from the kitchen. Rebecca was on her cell phone, pacing near the kitchen island, so focused on her conversation that she didn't notice the small boy standing in the doorway. If you feel my words, share your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Ethan heard words. Most of them flew over his 3-year-old head, but some of them he recognized. Words that burned themselves into his memory. Morgan, money, insurance policy, accident. No one would question it. She trusts me completely. She has no family left. After she's gone, we get everything. Stupid woman. Ethan was 3 years old. He didn't understand what insurance policy meant, couldn't grasp what accident implied in this context. But he knew Aunt Morgan. He knew the way his mama's voice turned cold and mean when she said, "stupid woman." And even at 3, he understood that whatever his mama was planning, it was bad. Really bad. The next morning, innocent and confused, Ethan asked his mother a question that would seal his silence for the next 4 years. "Mama, what does accident mean? Are you talking about Aunt Morgan?" Rebecca's entire body went rigid. She grabbed Ethan's small arms so hard that bruises bloomed like dark flowers across his skin, marks that she'd later explain away as him bumping into furniture. She knelt down until they were face to face, and Ethan said he'd never seen his mama look so scary. "Listen to me very carefully," Rebecca had said, her voice low and dangerous. "If you ever speak again to anyone about anything you heard, something terrible will happen to Aunt Morgan. Your voice is dangerous now. Every word you say hurts her. Every sound you make puts her in danger. If you love your Auntie Morgan, if you want to keep her safe, you will never make another sound. Not one word, not one peep. Do you understand me?" Ethan loved me. I was the aunt who brought him art supplies and new books. I was the one who got down on the floor to play trucks for hours without getting bored. I was the one who made funny voices when I read stories, who let him stay up past bedtime sometimes, who treated him like he was the most important person in the world. So Ethan, at 3 years old, made a choice that no child should ever have to make. He stopped talking completely. He gave up his voice to protect someone he loved from a danger he didn't fully understand, but knew was real. I sat there on Rebecca's expensive hardwood floor, holding this brave little boy while he explained his sacrifice. And I couldn't stop crying. 4 years. 4 years of silence. 4 years of fear. 4 years of believing that his voice could hurt me, all while his mother played the role of devoted parent to a special needs child, collecting sympathy and praise and probably researching how to kill her best friend and make it look like an accident. "What else do you know, sweetheart?" I asked gently, wiping tears from my face. "What else have you seen?" It turned out that being silent made Ethan invisible in the worst possible way. Adults talked freely around him, assuming he couldn't understand or couldn't tell anyone, even if he did. Rebecca and Marcus forgot he was listening. They forgot he was even there sometimes. And Ethan, unable to speak, learned to observe everything with those careful, ancient eyes. He'd seen his mother practicing my signature over and over, on scratch paper, hundreds of attempts, until she could forge my handwriting almost perfectly. He'd heard phone conversations about life insurance policies and beneficiary claims. He'd watched his father become more and more afraid, agreeing to everything Rebecca said, never questioning, never standing up, just going along with plans that Ethan didn't fully understand but knew involved hurting me. He'd observed his mother perform for neighbors, for other parents at the playground, for his teachers. The perfect mask of a loving mother making sacrifices for her disabled son. Everyone believed it. Everyone praised Rebecca's strength and dedication. She'd even won some kind of community service award last year for her advocacy work with special needs families. The hypocrisy of it made me want to scream. And then 3 nights ago, Ethan had overheard something that made him realize he couldn't stay silent anymore, no matter what threats his mother had made. He'd woken up thirsty, a frequent problem for kids, and crept to the top of the stairs. His parents were in the kitchen, voices low, but not low enough, discussing their plan. "The cookies will make her sick enough for the hospital," Rebecca had said, her voice clinical and cold. Not fatal, obviously, just severe food poisoning symptoms, maybe some neurological effects. She'll be incapacitated for at least 72 hours. The doctors will think it's a bad reaction or natural food poisoning. "What about Ethan, while we're supposedly in Bali?" Marcus had asked, his voice shaky. "Sarah from next door already agreed to take him if anything happens. I told her Morgan sometimes has episodes, health issues she doesn't talk about. Sarah's a nurse, she was happy to help. She thinks she's doing a good deed." Ethan said he heard papers rustling, like his mother was organizing documents. "And while Morgan's in the hospital, completely out of it, we'll be in Portland meeting with that lawyer who doesn't know her. I have all the forged papers ready, the power of attorney, everything. We'll transfer the life insurance payout to my name, the one she named me as beneficiary on. $250,000, Marcus. Her company has excellent benefits. What about after? When she recovers? She won't question it. She never questions me. I'll tell her there was a mix-up with paperwork while she was sick, that I was trying to help, that she must have signed something and forgotten. She's so trusting, so pathetically grateful to have someone who cares about her after her family died. She'll believe whatever I say." A pause. Then Marcus's voice barely audible. "And if she doesn't? If she asks too many questions?" Rebecca's laugh was cold. "Then we moved to plan B. A real accident this time. Her depression, her isolation, her tragic history. No one would be surprised if she finally just gave up. We've been laying that groundwork for months, haven't we? All those concerned comments about her mental health, her weight loss, her withdrawal from friends." Ethan had crept back to his room, climbed into bed, and made a decision. His voice might be dangerous, but staying silent while his mother hurt Aunt Morgan was more dangerous. He'd waited, counting down the hours until his parents left, until he could finally break his silence and save the person who'd shown him nothing but love. I pulled Ethan close, holding him like he was the most precious thing in the world, because right then he was. "You saved my life," I whispered into his hair. "You know that? You saved my life, and you're the bravest person I've ever met." His small arms wrapped around my neck, fierce and tight. "I couldn't let her hurt you, Aunt Morgan. Not anymore. I'm sorry I waited so long. I was scared." "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. You did exactly the right thing at exactly the right time." I looked over at the cookies scattered across the floor, those beautiful chocolate chip cookies that my best friend had baked with poison and fake concern. I needed to think like an analyst. like someone who dealt with facts and numbers and proof. Emotion could wait. Right now, I needed to be smart. I stood up, my legs still shaky, and pulled out my phone. The first call I made was to someone I'd known since my undergrad days at UW, someone I trusted more than almost anyone. Natalie Kenji answered on the second ring. "Morgan, what's wrong?" Natalie and I had been dorm mates freshman year. She'd gone into medicine, becoming an emergency room physician at Harborview Medical Center. We'd stayed close through everything, through my marriage and divorce, through her own struggles with fertility treatments, through all the messy complications of adult life. She was direct, brilliant, and had a bullshit detector more accurate than any lie detector test. "Nat, I need you to come to Rebecca's place right now. Something happened. Something really bad. I can't explain over the phone. Please just come." I must have sounded terrified because she didn't ask questions. "On my way. I'm off shift in 10 minutes. Hold tight." 45 minutes later, Natalie was at the door, still in her scrubs, her black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, concern written all over her face. She took one look at me, then at Ethan standing beside me, then at the cookies scattered on the floor. "Talk to me," she said simply. So I did. All of it. The cookies Rebecca had insisted I eat, the trip that wasn't really a trip to Bali, and Ethan, my supposedly mute nephew, who had spoken for the first time in 4 years to warn me that my best friend was trying to poison me. When I finished, Natalie was quiet for a long moment, her doctor brain processing everything. Then she walked over to Ethan and knelt down to his level. "Hi Ethan, I'm Dr. Kenji, but you can call me Nat. Your Aunt Morgan told me what you did, how brave you were. Can I tell you something?" She waited for his nod. "You're probably the bravest kid I've ever met, and I work with sick and injured kids every single day. What you did took more courage than most adults have in their entire lives." Ethan almost smiled, just a tiny twitch of his lips. But it counted. Natalie stood up and got to work. "Okay, first priority. These cookies need to be tested. I have contacts at the toxicology lab who can run an emergency analysis. If there's anything wrong with them, we'll know within hours." She pulled latex gloves from her bag, because of course she carried medical supplies everywhere, and carefully collected several cookies into an evidence bag she just happened to have. "Always prepared," she muttered. "Girl Scout training never fails." "Second priority," she continued, her voice shifting into that calm, authoritative doctor mode. "What else do we have? There's got to be more evidence if Rebecca's been planning this." I looked at Ethan. "Sweetheart, you said you know where your mom keeps important papers. Can you show me?" He led us to Rebecca's home office, a perfectly organized room that looked like it belonged in an interior design magazine. Everything was aesthetic, curated, performative. There was a locked filing cabinet in the corner, the kind with a combination lock. "The code is 0408, Ethan said softly. "April 8th, the day she and Daddy got married." Of course, Rebecca would use something sentimental because it made her feel clever. I punched in the code. The lock clicked open, and what we found inside made my stomach turn inside out. First, there were copies of documents with my signature, except they weren't my actual signatures. They were close, eerily close, but wrong in small ways that I noticed immediately. The capital M in Morgan had a different slant. The loop in my C was too round. Rebecca had practiced, but she wasn't perfect. These were authorization forms for my life insurance policy, documents changing the beneficiary payout structure, forms I'd never actually signed. Second, there were bank statements, not from the insurance policy, but from something else. A joint checking account in both our names that I didn't remember opening. Looking at the statements made my blood run cold. There were deposits, regular ones, that matched the timing of my paychecks. Someone had been routing part of my direct deposit into this account for the past 8 months. Small amounts, $400 here, $600 there. Amounts small enough that I wouldn't notice immediately, especially with my busy work schedule. The total, roughly $32,000. Stolen. Third, printed emails between Rebecca and someone named Douglas Werner, an attorney in Portland. They discussed power of attorney, beneficiary transfers, and what the emails delicately referred to as Morgan's declining mental state, and need for assistance with financial decisions. The meeting was scheduled for day 5, exactly when they were supposed to be sipping cocktails on a beach in Bali. 4th, and this one shattered something in my chest. A journal. An actual handwritten journal, with dates and entries, all in Rebecca's artistic handwriting. The entries described my supposed mental health crisis, my depression, my paranoid delusions, my inability to cope with daily life. Page after page of fabricated observations, building a narrative of a woman on the edge of breakdown. She'd been constructing this false history for over a year, creating a paper trail that would make me look unstable, unreliable, possibly even suicidal, if it came to that. My best friend had been systematically destroying my credibility and stealing from me for months, while I trusted her completely, while I loved her nephew, while I believed we were family. Natalie photographed everything methodically, like she was documenting injuries in the emergency room. "This is premeditated fraud," she said, her voice tight with anger. "This isn't some impulsive thing. She's been planning this for over a year, Morgan. Probably longer." I sat down on Rebecca's expensive office chair, the one she probably bought with my stolen money, and tried to process what I was looking at. Numbers, dates, patterns. My accountant brain started organizing the information automatically, mapping out the timeline. When did the stealing start? When did she open that joint account? When did the forged signatures begin? Then Natalie's phone buzzed. Her contact at the toxicology lab, a colleague who owed her favors from their residency days, had rushed the analysis as a personal favor. The results made my hands go numb. The cookies contained a concentrated dose of a prescription anti-anxiety medication, the kind that causes severe drowsiness, and a plant-based toxin that induces violent gastrointestinal distress. Not enough to be immediately fatal, but absolutely enough to send someone to the emergency room in critical condition. Combined, the effects would incapacitate someone for days, possibly causing organ damage depending on dosage and individual reaction. Rebecca hadn't just tried to poison me. She'd carefully calculated exactly how to make me sick enough to be hospitalized, but not so obviously poisoned that it would trigger immediate investigation. It would look like a terrible reaction to food, maybe contamination, possibly an underlying health condition. Just bad luck for poor Morgan, who'd already had so much tragedy in her life. There was one more call I needed to make, and I was dreading it. I scrolled through my contacts and found the name I was looking for, James Nakamura. We'd been in the same study group in college, back when I was majoring in finance, and he was pre-law. He'd gone on to become a prosecutor for King County, handling white-collar crimes and fraud cases. We'd stayed friendly over the years, grabbing coffee occasionally, keeping up through social media. I called him, explained everything, my voice somehow staying steady, even though my hands were shaking. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "Morgan," James finally said, his voice serious and gentle at the same time. "This is felony fraud, forgery, identity theft, financial exploitation, and attempted poisoning. What Rebecca did to Ethan, coercing a child into silence through psychological abuse, that's criminal as well. This is serious, very serious. What do I do?" "You let me handle the legal side. I'll coordinate with Seattle PD and bring in the FBI. This crosses state lines with that Portland attorney, which makes it federal. We'll need to verify whether Douglas Werner is a victim or an accomplice. And Rebecca, she can't know you're onto her. If she gets spooked, she could run with whatever money she's already accessed. You need to make her think her plan is working perfectly." I looked at the cookies, at the evidence, at Ethan sitting quietly on the couch, watching everything with those observant eyes. I have to pretend I ate them, pretend I'm sick and helpless, while she's in Portland trying to rob me. "Can you do that?" James asked. I thought about Rebecca's honey-sweet voice, her perfect smile, her performance of friendship that had fooled me for 12 years. If she could act, so could I. "Yes," I said, "I can do that." 3 days. I had to act sick for 3 days, while the legal machinery moved into position. 3 days of pretending to be the trusting, stupid friend Rebecca thought I was, while she walked straight into a trap. The next morning, day 2 of their supposed Bali trip, I sat in Rebecca's living room with my phone in my hand. Ethan sat next to me, finally free to speak, but still naturally quiet after 4 years of silence. Natalie was on the couch across from us, ready to coach me through this performance. I dialed Rebecca's number. It went to voicemail, exactly as expected. If she was really in Bali, she'd have limited international service. Of course, she wasn't in Bali. She was in a hotel in Portland preparing to forge my signature and steal my insurance money. But I had to play along. I made my voice weak, shaky, scared. "Rebecca, something's really wrong. I ate those cookies last night like you told me to, and I've been so sick, I can't stop throwing up. I'm dizzy and weak, and I can barely stand up. I think I need to go to the emergency room. Don't worry about Ethan, he's fine. Sarah from next door said she can take him if I have to go to the hospital. I'm so sorry to bother you on your anniversary trip. I'll figure it out. Just wanted to let you know." I hung up. Natalie gave me a thumbs up. "Oscar-worthy. The little catch in your voice at the end was perfect." "I learned from watching The Master Manipulator," I said bitterly. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Not a panicked phone call. Not a worried voicemail asking which hospital, or if I needed her to come home. A text message. The message read, "Oh no, so sorry you're sick. Rest and feel better. Sarah is amazing. Don't worry about Ethan at all." Heart emoji, airplane emoji, palm tree emoji. I stared at those cheerful little emojis for a long time. My supposed best friend thought she'd poisoned me into a hospital stay, and her response was a couple of cartoon pictures and a generic feel-better message. She didn't even ask which hospital, Natalie said, reading over my shoulder. Didn't offer to cut the trip short. Didn't ask to talk to Ethan to make sure he was okay. Your best friend is actually a sociopath. Over the next several hours, while I played sick person, James and his FBI contacts moved fast. They tracked Rebecca and Marcus's actual location through credit card usage and cell phone pings. They were exactly where Ethan said they'd be, checked into a mid-range hotel in downtown Portland, preparing for their meeting with the attorney. The FBI contacted Douglas Werner, the Portland lawyer. It turned out Werner had been having doubts. The signatures on the authorization forms Rebecca had sent him looked off. He'd been planning to request identity verification before the meeting. When federal agents explained what was actually happening, Werner agreed to cooperate immediately. He was horrified that someone had tried to use him in a fraud scheme. Meanwhile, Natalie's husband, who worked in cybersecurity, helped us document Rebecca's digital footprint. Her social media told an interesting story. She'd posted pictures from Bali that were actually stock photos downloaded from travel websites, posted at scheduled times to make it look like she was really there. She'd gotten overconfident. While this was happening, the most important thing was taking care of Ethan. James arranged for a child forensic interviewer to take Ethan's statement properly, following all the legal protocols for minor witnesses in criminal cases. It had to be done right, recorded correctly, with a child psychologist present to make sure Ethan wasn't being coached or traumatized further. I was nervous for him. This was a lot for a 7-year-old who'd been silent for 4 years. But when the interview started, Ethan sat up straight in his chair, looked directly at the kind woman asking him questions, and told the truth. He described what he'd heard at 3 years old, the threats his mother made, the 4 years of silence, the conversations he'd observed, the night he heard the plan about the cookies. When it was over, the interviewer told me privately that Ethan's testimony was some of the clearest and most credible she'd encountered. Kids who've been forced into silence and finally break it tend to have extraordinary recall. They've been observing, processing, remembering everything because they couldn't speak. Ethan had spent 4 years watching, and now he was finally telling. I also sent the required text updates to Rebecca, maintaining the sick act. Day 2 text, still feeling awful, doctor says maybe food poisoning or a bad reaction to something. So weak. Ethan is doing great with Sarah. Don't worry about us. Day 3 text, a little better but still pretty sick. Sleeping most of the day. Sarah says Ethan is being perfect as always. Hope you're having an amazing time. Each message I imagined Rebecca reading it and smiling, thinking her stupid trusting friend was exactly where she wanted her. Too sick to stop anything, too naive to suspect anything. The thought made me feel cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. If you feel my words, Show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Day 4 arrived, the day Rebecca and Marcus walked into that law office in Portland, expecting to complete the theft of my life insurance money. Instead, they walked into something very different. I wasn't there in person. James set up a secure video feed so I could watch from Rebecca's apartment in Seattle. Ethan sat beside me, holding my hand, nervous but determined. Natalie was on my other side. We watched multiple camera angles as Rebecca and Marcus entered the building. Rebecca looked perfect, like she always did. Professional blazer, tasteful jewelry, concerned expression carefully arranged on her face. She was carrying that expensive leather portfolio she'd bought last year, the one I now realized probably came from my stolen money. Inside that portfolio were forged documents and a decade of betrayal. Marcus looked like he wanted to throw up. He was sweating through his shirt, his eyes darting around the lobby like a trapped animal, looking for escape. Not evil like Rebecca, just weak and scared and willing to go along with anything to avoid confrontation. They approached the receptionist, smiled, gave their names. The receptionist, who'd been briefed by the FBI, smiled back and led them down the hallway toward the conference room. I watched them follow her, Rebecca confident and calm, Marcus increasingly panicked. They walked into the conference room. Douglas Werner sat at the head of the table, professional and serious. He didn't smile when they entered. 2 other people sat at the table, a man and a woman in plain business clothes. FBI agents Morrison and Park, though Rebecca didn't know that yet. "Mrs. Holloway," Werner said, his voice carefully neutral. "Please have a seat. These are agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They have some questions about the documentation you submitted." I watched Rebecca's face through the video feed. For just a second, maybe 2 heartbeats, I saw pure panic flash across her features. Then the mask slammed down hard. She sat gracefully, crossed her legs, placed her hands on the table, and smiled her perfect smile. "Of course," she said in that honey voice. "I'm happy to clarify anything. There must be some misunderstanding." Agent Morrison was calm, almost friendly. She asked Rebecca to confirm her identity, her relationship to me, her role in my financial matters. Rebecca confirmed everything smoothly. She still thought she could talk her way out, still believed her performance was good enough. Then Morrison placed 2 documents on the table side by side. On the left, one of the forged signatures from the insurance authorization forms. On the right, my actual signature from verified documents provided by my employer and bank. "Mrs. Holloway, can you explain why these signatures don't match?" Rebecca barely glanced at them. P. Strong Tone Morgan has always had inconsistent handwriting. It varies depending on her stress level and mental state, and frankly, she's been struggling lately. I have extensive documentation about her mental health challenges. P. Strong Agent Park spoke up for the first time. "We've reviewed your documentation. The journal entries describing Morgan Castellano's supposed mental health crisis." He paused deliberately. "Interesting thing. We spoke with Morgan's employer, her therapist Dr. Patricia Chen, her physician Dr. Robert Tam, and several of her colleagues. Everyone describes her as exceptionally stable, highly functional, and mentally healthy. Her therapist specifically states she's one of the most grounded clients in her practice." And the mask cracked slightly. Rebecca's smile tightened. "They don't see her the way family does. Best friends see the truth." Morrison's voice stayed calm but gained an edge. "We also have bank records showing you opened a joint account in Morgan's name without her knowledge or consent, routing portions of her paycheck into that account over 8 months. That's approximately $32,000 in fraudulent transfers. We also have," Park continued, placing another document on the table, "toxicology reports from cookies you prepared and gave to Morgan. Cookies containing prescription medication and plant-based toxins, in quantities that would cause severe illness requiring hospitalization." Marcus made a small wounded sound. Rebecca shot him a look that could have frozen lava. Then Morrison pulled out a tablet and pressed play. Ethan's voice, clear and strong despite his young age, filled the conference room. "My mommy told me when I was 3 years old that if I ever talked again, something bad would happen to Aunt Morgan. She said my voice was dangerous, that every word I said would hurt her. So I stopped talking for 4 years to keep Aunt Morgan safe. But then I heard Mommy and Daddy planning to poison Aunt Morgan with the cookies, and I knew I had to tell the truth, even if I was scared. The recording continued with Ethan describing the overheard phone call when he was 3, the threats, the years of silence, the detailed plan he'd heard about the cookies and the meeting in Portland. Every word delivered in that careful, serious way he had. The silence in that conference room was absolute. Rebecca stared at the tablet like it had materialized from another dimension. Her face had gone completely white. "That's not possible. He can't talk. He's been mute since birth. This is fabricated, you fabricated evidence." Morrison's voice was quiet now, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "Your son isn't mute, Mrs. Holloway. According to the actual medical records we obtained, not the false narrative you've been telling people, Ethan was diagnosed with selective mutism at age 3. That's a psychological condition, usually caused by trauma or severe anxiety. The kind of trauma that might result from a parent threatening a child into silence." She paused to let that sink in. "Your 7-year-old son stopped speaking for 4 years because you terrorized him into believing his voice would hurt someone he loved. That's psychological child abuse, Mrs. Holloway." Rebecca's composure shattered completely. What came out was ugly and raw. Nothing like the sweet, artistic mother everyone thought they knew. He was supposed to stay quiet. He promised. The little brat was never supposed to tell. "Rebecca," Marcus's voice, shaking and desperate, "stop talking. Just stop." But she couldn't stop. The mask was off now, and what was underneath was something vicious and cornered. She was supposed to eat those cookies and end up in the hospital like planned. She's so pathetically trusting, so stupidly grateful to have someone who pretends to care about her after her family died. It should have worked. Agent Park stood slowly. "Rebecca Holloway, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, attempted poisoning, and child endangerment. Please stand and place your hands behind your back." "Marcus," Rebecca turned to her husband, demanding, commanding, Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Tell them Morgan must have misunderstood something." Marcus was crying now, tears streaming down his face. He looked at the agents and said the only smart thing I'd ever heard him say. "I want a lawyer, a separate lawyer. I'll cooperate fully with the investigation. She planned everything. The signatures, the bank account, the cookies, all of it. I just went along because I was terrified of her. I'll testify. I'll tell you everything." Rebecca's expression when she looked at her husband was pure hatred. "You spineless coward. After everything I did for us, the life I built, the money I was getting for our future." "You mean the money you were stealing," Morrison said flatly, "and the best friend you were trying to poison." The handcuffs clicked around Rebecca's wrists. She was still talking, still trying to explain and justify and manipulate, but there was no one left to manipulate. The evidence was overwhelming. The testimony was clear. Her own words had condemned her. I watched through the video feed as my former best friend, the woman who'd held my hand through my darkest moments, and then tried to destroy me for money, was led out of that conference room and into a waiting police car. Ethan squeezed my hand. "It's over, Aunt Morgan." "Yeah, sweetheart," I whispered. "It's over." But in some ways, it was just beginning. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, police statements, and media attention I definitely didn't want. Turned out fraud cases involving child coercion and attempted poisoning make for compelling news stories. I stopped reading the articles. They kept calling Rebecca things like master manipulator and calculating sociopath, and while those things were probably true, they also felt too simple for someone I'd loved like a sister for 12 years. Natalie kept me grounded during all of it. She made sure I ate, made sure I went to my therapy appointments with Dr. Chen, made sure I didn't completely fall apart when the full weight of the betrayal hit me at 3 in the morning. "You're allowed to grieve," Dr. Chen told me during one session. "You lost someone important, even if that person turned out to be someone you never really knew. Grief doesn't care about circumstances. It just cares that you loved someone and they're gone." The financial recovery took time but was surprisingly straightforward. The stolen money from the joint account was traced and returned. My insurance policy was secured, and my financial accounts were locked down with new security measures that would have made Fort Knox jealous. Rebecca faced multiple felony charges. The evidence against her was crushing. Her own words, recorded in that Portland conference room, were damning. Marcus's testimony, given in exchange for a reduced sentence, detailed years of planning and manipulation. The journal entries, the forged signatures, the toxic cookies, everything pointed to premeditated fraud and attempted harm. She took a plea deal to avoid trial, didn't even fight it. 15 years in federal prison for the fraud and poisoning charges. Additional time for the child abuse case. She'd be in her early 50s when she got out, if she served the full sentence. I didn't attend any of the hearings. I was done giving Rebecca any more of my time or emotional energy. I had better things to do, like taking care of a 7-year-old boy who needed stability and safety, and someone who would never, ever use his voice as a weapon against him. Which brings me to the most important part of this nightmare. Ethan. Marcus signed over full custody without hesitation. He'd participated in the fraud, he'd known about the psychological abuse, and he'd done nothing to stop any of it. He didn't deserve to be Ethan's father. When James presented him with the custody termination papers, Marcus signed them immediately, his hands shaking. "He deserves better than me," Marcus said quietly. He always did. One good decision in a lifetime of weak ones. 3 weeks after Rebecca's arrest, I stood in King County Family Court for the emergency custody hearing. I dressed in my most professional outfit, the one I wore for important client presentations. This was more important than any client I'd ever had. Ethan sat beside me wearing his favorite blue shirt, the one with the small rocket ships on it. He was nervous, I could tell, but he wasn't silent anymore. He'd asked me that morning what would happen, and I'd told him the truth. The judge would ask him questions, and then decide where he should live. "I want to live with you," he'd said simply. "Is that okay?" "That's more than okay, sweetheart. That's everything I want too." The judge, an older woman named Judge Catherine Brennan, with kind eyes behind frameless glasses, reviewed the case file. Rebecca's arrest, Marcus's cooperation and custody termination, the evidence of years of psychological abuse, the 4 years of coerced silence. She read it all carefully, her expression serious. Then she looked directly at Ethan, not at me, at him. "Ethan, I understand you recently started speaking again after being silent for a very long time. That must have been incredibly difficult and incredibly brave." She paused. "I'd like to ask you directly, in your own words, where would you like to live?" Ethan looked at me, then at the judge, then back at me. Then he stood up, all 7 years and about 50 pounds of him, wearing his rocket ship shirt, and more courage than most adults show in a lifetime. "I want to live with my Aunt Morgan," he said clearly. "She's the only one he ever really listened to me, even when I couldn't talk. She read me stories and played games with me and never made me feel like something was wrong with me. She made me feel safe." He paused, then added, "Also, she makes really good pancakes with chocolate chips in them." Quiet laughter rippled through the courtroom. Even Judge Brennan smiled. She signed the papers. Emergency custody granted to Morgan Castellano, with a path toward permanent legal guardianship once the standard evaluations were complete. Walking out of that courthouse with Ethan's small hand in mine felt like the first real breath I'd taken in weeks. The sky was that particular Seattle gray that locals know means it might rain any second, but also might not, the kind of sky that keeps you guessing. I didn't care. My nephew, my son now in every way that mattered, was coming home with me. That evening, we had dinner in my apartment, which was already in the process of becoming our apartment. I'd started transforming my home office into Ethan's bedroom. He'd picked out paint colors, a soft blue that reminded him of the ocean. And we'd been shopping for furniture together. Bookshelves, lots of bookshelves, because the kid inherited my love of reading. A cozy beanbag chair for the corner by the window. Posters of planets and rockets and dinosaurs because his interests were adorably varied. "Aunt Morgan?" Ethan asked through a mouthful of spaghetti. "Yeah, buddy. Can I tell you about space stuff? I've been reading about black holes and they're really cool and kind of scary, and I want to talk about them." I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. "Absolutely. Tell me everything about black holes." What followed was a 20-minute enthusiastic lecture about event horizons, gravitational pull, time dilation, and why black holes weren't actually holes at all, but super-dense collapsed stars. I understood maybe 30% of it, but I listened to every word with complete attention. This is what it should sound like, I thought. Not silence, not fear, just a kid being excited about something he learned, sharing it with someone who cares enough to listen. Ethan started therapy the next week, with a specialist in childhood trauma and selective mutism. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo was patient and understanding, and Ethan took to her immediately. The sessions weren't always easy. 4 years of enforced silence and psychological manipulation don't disappear overnight. There were hard days when the old fear crept back in, when Ethan would go quiet for hours, terrified that speaking might somehow hurt me. But there were more good days than bad. Days when he laughed freely. Days when he sang along to songs on the radio. Days when he came home from his new school bursting with stories about his teacher and his new friends, who only knew him as the kid who talked a lot about dinosaurs and space, not as the mute kid. The trust fund Rebecca had tried to steal was frozen and thoroughly audited. Every dollar was accounted for and secured. I became the sole administrator, managing it carefully for Ethan's future. College fund, therapy costs, anything he might need. The life insurance policy stayed in place with Ethan as the beneficiary, not Rebecca. Appropriate, considering she'd tried to claim it through fraud and poison. I also made a difficult decision about my family home, the one I'd inherited from my parents. I couldn't live there anymore, not after everything. Too many complicated memories. So I sold it, and used part of the money to set up a proper college fund for Ethan, and put the rest in savings. Financial security. Walk-away money multiplied. Sometimes practical planning saves your life twice. I think about my parents sometimes, about how they died before they could meet Ethan, before they could see me become a mother in every way except biology. I think about the family I lost, and the family I found and almost lost, and finally kept. Mom would have loved Ethan. Dad would have taught him how to fix things, how to be steady and reliable. They would have been proud of both of us, I hope. One Saturday morning, about 2 months after the custody hearing, Ethan and I had breakfast on my apartment balcony. Just simple waffles, his favorite, with too much syrup and strawberries. The Seattle skyline spread out before us, the Space Needle visible in the distance, morning light turning everything soft and golden. Ethan was in the middle of telling me an elaborate story about a dream he'd had, involving a penguin who ran a bakery on Mars, and a very polite alien named Harold, who only ate purple foods and kept apologizing for accidentally teleporting people to Venus. It made absolutely no sense. It was perfect. I sipped my coffee and listened, really listened, to every ridiculous detail. This is what family sounds like, I thought. Not silence enforced by threats, not manipulation disguised as love. Just this. A kid telling me about dream penguins on Mars. Morning light making everything feel possible. 2 people who chose each other, who saved each other, sitting together and being exactly who we needed to be. Ethan paused in his story and looked at me seriously. "Aunt Morgan, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think things happen for a reason? Like, bad things happen, but then they lead to good things?" I thought about that question carefully. I don't know if things happen for a specific reason, but I think sometimes terrible things reveal truths we needed to know, even when learning those truths hurts. And sometimes surviving terrible things shows us exactly who we are and who we want to become. He considered this. So the bad stuff with my mom, it was bad. Really bad. Like, not just visits, but actually together. "Yeah," I said softly. "Yeah, it did. Then I guess I'm glad I used my voice when I did, even though I was scared. Because now, I have you, and you have me, and we're a family." I reached over and hugged him, this brave, brilliant boy who'd given up his voice to protect someone he loved, and then found the courage to speak when it mattered most. "We're definitely a family, kiddo. The best kind." Sometimes the people who hurt us are the ones we trusted most. Sometimes the family we're born into isn't the family we need. And sometimes a child's courage to break their silence can save more than one life. I found my family in the most unexpected way, in the ruins of a friendship that was never real, in the voice of a boy who'd been forced into silence. Some stories don't have happy endings, but ours was just beginning. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. 4 months later, the legal paperwork was complete. I was officially Ethan's legal guardian, with adoption proceedings scheduled to begin in 6 months, once the standard waiting period was satisfied. We celebrated with pizza, ice cream, and a movie marathon of his choosing, which turned out to be every Jurassic Park film back-to-back, because the kid was nothing if not committed to his interests. Life settled into a new normal: school drop-offs and pickups, homework help with increasingly complex math problems that made me grateful I'd kept my old textbooks, weekend trips to the science museum where Ethan could explain planetary motion to me in exhausting detail, therapy appointments that gradually shifted from weekly to bi-weekly as he continued healing. I went back to work, grateful for the routine and structure of spreadsheets and financial analysis. My employer had been incredibly understanding during everything, and returning to normal work felt grounding. Numbers don't lie, they don't manipulate, they just are what they are. After months of emotional chaos, that simplicity was comforting. Natalie became Aunt Nat, officially inducted into our small, chosen family. She and her husband David taught Ethan how to cook simple meals, a skill I desperately needed help with, since my cooking repertoire consisted of exactly 3 dishes, and 2 of them were variations of pasta. We found our rhythm, Ethan and I, our own language of inside jokes and comfortable silences that weren't scary anymore, just peaceful. He learned that not all quiet moments meant danger. I learned that not all loud voices were threats. We both learned that family isn't about blood or legal documents, though those matter. It's about showing up, listening, keeping each other safe. One evening, about 6 months after everything, I was tucking Ethan into bed in his room with the blue walls and galaxy posters and mountains of books about dinosaurs and space exploration. We'd just finished reading the newest installment of his favorite series about dragons who solved mysteries, because apparently that's a genre that exists, and kids love it. "Aunt Morgan?" he said sleepily. "Yeah, buddy. Do you ever think about her? About my mom?" I thought carefully before answering. Dr. Okonkwo had been clear about the importance of honest, age-appropriate answers when Ethan asked about Rebecca. "Sometimes," I admitted. "It's complicated. I'm angry about what she did, to both of us. But I'm also sad because I loved the person I thought she was, even if that person wasn't real." "I think about her sometimes too," Ethan said quietly. "Mostly I'm just sad and confused. Why would someone hurt people on purpose like that? I think sometimes people get so focused on what they want that they forget to care about who they hurt to get it. It doesn't make it okay. It's never okay. But it's the only explanation I have." He nodded against his pillow. "I'm glad I have you instead. You're a better mom than she ever was." My heart cracked open in the best way possible. "I'm glad I have you too. You're the best thing that came from all of this." As I turned off his light and stood in the doorway watching him settle into sleep, safe and warm and finally free to use his voice however he wanted, I thought about the strange path that brought us here. Rebecca's betrayal, her elaborate scheme to poison me and steal my money, had revealed truths I needed to know no matter how much they hurt. Her cruelty had backfired in the most poetic way possible. She'd lost everything: her freedom, her son, her carefully constructed image, all while trying to take everything from me. And me? I'd gained a son, a real family, a chance to be the kind of parent Rebecca had pretended to be. Some nights I still have dreams about those cookies, about what would have happened if Ethan hadn't found the courage to speak. Would I have eaten them? Would I have ended up in the hospital while Rebecca forged my signature in Portland? Would I have survived whatever plan B Rebecca mentioned in that overheard conversation? I don't let myself think about it too long. That's not the timeline we're living in. In this timeline, a 7-year-old boy broke 4 years of silence to save someone he loved. In this timeline, we both survived. In this timeline, we're building something real together. Last month, Ethan told his therapist that he doesn't remember what his mother's voice sounds like anymore. That memory has faded. But he remembers mine. He remembers the stories I read to him when he was silent. He remembers that I listened even when he couldn't speak. He remembers feeling safe. Dr. Okonkwo said, "That's significant. The traumatic memories will always be there, part of his history, but they're being balanced by new, better memories. Memories of security and love and freedom to be exactly who he is." Yesterday, Ethan came home from school excited because they'd started a unit on public speaking. The teacher asked if anyone wanted to volunteer to give the first presentation. Ethan's hand shot up immediately. He chose to talk about selective mutism, about why some kids go silent and how important it is to be patient with them. "I told them I used to be selectively mute," he explained to me over dinner, "but I'm not anymore because I'm safe now, and I have people who listen. And I said that if anyone in our class ever goes quiet, we should be kind, because they might be scared of something and need help." He gave his presentation this morning. According to his teacher's email, the class was riveted. Ethan spoke clearly, answered questions thoughtfully, and helped other kids understand something complicated with compassion and insight that seemed far beyond his 7, almost 8 years. "I'm so proud of you," I told him when he got home, and I meant it with everything in me. "I wanted to help other kids who might be scared like I was," he said simply. "My voice can do good things now. It's not dangerous anymore." That's when I realized he'd completely rewritten the narrative Rebecca had implanted in his brain. She'd told him his voice was dangerous, that speaking would hurt people. Now he knew the truth. His voice was powerful. His voice saved both of us. His voice could help others. Next week, the adoption will be finalized. Ethan Castellano, legally and forever. We're having a small celebration, just us, Natalie and David, James, who handled the legal work, and Dr. Okonkwo, who helped Ethan find his voice again in every sense. Nothing fancy. Just the people who showed up when it mattered, who helped us build this family from the ruins of betrayal. I've learned a lot through this nightmare. I've learned that trust is precious and should be given carefully. I've learned that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones wearing the masks of friendship and love. I've learned that children are often braver than adults give them credit for. I've learned that family isn't about biology or legal documents. It's about choice and commitment and showing up every single day. But most importantly, I've learned to listen, really listen, not just to words, but to silences too, to what's being said and what's being carefully not said, to the truth hiding underneath performance and pretense. Ethan taught me that. A boy who couldn't speak for 4 years taught me how to truly hear. Sometimes I think about Rebecca in prison, serving her sentence, living with the consequences of her choices. I don't hate her, not anymore. Hate takes too much energy, and I have better things to do with my energy. But I don't forgive her either. Some things are too big for forgiveness, too calculated, too cruel. What she did to Ethan, terrorizing a 3-year-old into silence, using his love for me as a weapon against him, that's unforgivable. What she tried to do to me, 12 years of friendship building toward betrayal and poison, that's unforgivable too. But I'm grateful, in a strange way, that she showed me exactly who she was before it was too late. Before I ate those cookies. Before she successfully stole everything. Before more damage could be done. Ethan's courage gave us both a chance at something better. A real family, honest love, a future built on truth instead of manipulation. That's worth everything. Tonight, after dinner and homework and the nightly battle to brush teeth for the full 2 minutes, Ethan and I sat on the couch together. He was reading his book about black holes, I was reviewing a work report, and the apartment was quiet in that comfortable way that means you're not alone. "Aunt Morgan?" Ethan said without looking up from his book. "Yeah, sweetheart." But from a child who'd been forced into silence for 4 years, who'd sacrificed his voice to protect someone, who'd finally found the safety to speak freely, those 3 words meant everything. "I love you too, buddy, so much." He went back to his book, I went back to my report. The moment passed, ordinary and perfect. This is what we built from the ashes of betrayal. this quiet, safe, honest life, this family, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Your support means everything as I share these truths, as I use my voice to bring light to the dark places where secrets hide and people suffer in silence. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community, so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Remember, sometimes the quietest people are the bravest. Sometimes breaking silence is the most courageous thing you can do. And sometimes the family we need finds us in the most unexpected ways. Keep listening. Keep speaking your truth. Keep being brave.